Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Good evening to those who are in my time zone here in Germany, Berlin. And thank you to the organizers, Alvin and Günther, for inviting me to this remarkable conference. I'm really impressed by the presentations and discussions so far, although the overall topic is so distressing. And also thank you very much to Missy for helping me to sort out the technical problems that I had just until 2 days ago. So I'm working on contemporary anti-Semitism, specifically in youth cultures. And in my PhD project, I'm focusing on anti-Semitism in German rap music. And as you can imagine, German rap music derives from American rap music. And the more I did research on anti-Semitism and conspiracy ideologies in hip hop culture, the more I realized that this phenomenon reaches back almost to the beginning of rap music in America. I just assume that only a few of you are listening to rap music in your free time, but I guess most of you know what rap music is and that it often contains harsh and aggressive language. Some people even feel offended by the lyrics and the images that rap music often portrays. And unfortunately, in some cases, I have to show you also offensive lyrics and public statements by rappers to prove my point. I would like to begin with the case of JayZ Electronica that Eunice Pollack has already pointed out to in her presentation on Louis Farrakhan last week. JayZ Electronica is a very prominent figure in American rap music. He is specifically known for his distinctive and mystical lyrics, and he has published a widely acclaimed album last year in March. It's called A Written Testimony, with very famous contributors such as JayZ and Travis Scott, for example. And the album was praised by the critics. It was named one of the best albums of 2020 by the British Guardian, and it even got nominated for a Grammy Award. However, it also sparked criticism, mainly from Jewish organizations, because the album contains a speech by Louis Farrakhan, the leader of the Nation of Islam, the honorable minister. That's how he is addressed by his followers. In the first two songs, JayZ Electronica included parts of Farrakhan's speech that the honorable minister held in 2010 in Atlanta. And one of those songs is named by JayZ Electronica, The Overwhelming Event. And the speech is called Who Are the Real Children of Israel? And I have to admit, I already said that last week that I watched this speech multiple times, and it's actually very impressive. Farrakhan is a brilliant speaker in a very evil way, because the speech is thoroughly anti-Semitic. On this picture, you can see Farrakhan holding volume 1 and 2 of The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews. For him, these books serve as proof for a Jewish conspiracy against Black people in America. Farrakhan is claiming that Jews were the main profiteers of transatlantic slavery, and that until today, Jews remain in power over Black people. And during his speech, he gives a few examples of how Black people in America, specifically Black rappers, are still exploited by powerful Jews. I will come back to that later in my presentation. The case of JayZ Electronica sheds a light on a phenomenon that has evolved during the past decades: anti-Semitism in American rap music. In my presentation, I will try to contribute to the discussions that we had last week, specifically about Black-Jewish relations, and I will try to follow up on specific aspects that have been brought up during this conference. In order to describe the role of anti-Semitic tropes in American rap music, I believe it is necessary to understand the narrative framework of rap music. Although there are many different rap genres, such as conscious, message-oriented rap, as well as gangsta rap, who all have their own subgenres, I will focus on one specific theme, a leitmotif, as you could say, that can be found in different rap genres, and that is rap as a discourse of crisis. That means that I will start with a historical perspective on rap music in the US, and I will focus on social, economic, and cultural circumstances of urban Black and Hispanic communities from the late 70s until the late 90s that shaped the content of rap music. Furthermore, I will explain the role of Black nationalist and Afrocentric ideas, especially during the time of the so-called golden era of rap music in the late 80s and mid 90s. And I will describe how these ideas merged with conspiracy theories. And finally, I will illustrate how anti-Semitic and also philo-Semitic tropes are implemented in this narrative framework of rap, in which the fight against social repression and criticism of social elites play a dominant role. Hip-hop culture started off in urban Black and Hispanic communities in New York City in the late 70s. And these communities, such as major parts of the Bronx, for example, Queens and Harlem, they were affected by social and economic distress. And at that point in time, the official youth unemployment rate in New York City was 60%. In some neighborhoods, it was even higher. Later on, during the 80s, the so-called Reaganomics did not change the situation to the better. It rather led to a drastic reduction of welfare programs and a tremendous growth of the low-income service sectors in urban areas. That caused a situation in which especially young people from urban Black and Hispanic communities were stuck in the service sector with low chances of upward economic and social mobility. From the mid-80s throughout the 90s, inner city neighborhoods were suffering from the rapid spread of HIV, as well as increasing numbers of crack cocaine addicts. The distribution of crack cocaine was mostly in the hands of gangs that were fighting each other in violent turf wars. And just to give you a number, in the year 1990 and 1991, more than 5,000 people were murdered in New York City, which was the highest rate in the history of the city. Furthermore, the so-called war on drugs, gang violence, but also anti-violence strategies such as three strikes laws led to a rise of mass incarceration that affected young Black men disproportionately. So this was the situation in many urban Black and Hispanic neighborhoods when hip-hop culture, especially rap music, evolved and developed into a dominant youth culture. Especially in the so-called conscious or message rap, but to a certain extent also in gangsta rap, rappers reflected on these social circumstances. And they used hip-hop to describe their everyday life in the ghetto, their social and economic exclusion, racism, as well as police brutality, and so on. The idea of competing with each other, usually in a non-violent way, is deeply rooted in hip-hop culture. In rap music, the battle still depicts a major theme. Rappers often express themselves as strong and powerful. They exaggerate their own abilities, they brag and boast, and even insult their real or imaginary opponent. In addition to that, they often perform an aggressive and oftentimes even violent and misogynist form of masculinity. They describe the social surrounding as dangerous, and they tend to illustrate life as trial in which only the fittest survive. By doing so, they claim to present life as it really is in their communities. Chuck D, head of the infamous rap crew Public Enemy, said in the early 90s that rap is the CNN of young Black America. Whether or not this is an accurate description of what rap was back then, rappers often claim to offer an authentic description of reality, especially when it comes to the portraying the downsides of American society, because they believe that other parts of mainstream culture were not willing to portray these issues. Many young Black people from many young people from Black and Hispanic communities regarded rap as an alternative source of knowledge and sometimes even a form of counter knowledge. Rappers, on the other hand, claim to serve as reporters from the streets who perform real talk and who spread an inconvenient truth. So in that way, the hip-hop culture was open to alternative narratives, and from the mid-80s on, political groups realized that significant parts of the hip-hop community were susceptible for their specific ideologies. Some of them tried to gain influence within the hip-hop community, especially the Nation of Islam and its leader, Louis Farrakhan. Like no other, he seemed to understand the crisis of the Black ghetto youth. He seemed to understand how to reach and speak to them. Farrakhan, for example, went to Chicago to mediate between rival gangs. He went to jails to speak to young Black prisoners and so on. And he delivered a message of Black empowerment that the Black left failed to deliver up until that point. And it actually helped Farrakhan that he was despised by liberals and conservatives, and also by major parts of the mainstream Black community, because the alienated urban Black youth could identify with someone who seemed to be despised by the rest of society, because that was just how they felt. And one could tell by the lyrics of many rappers that they followed Farrakhan's message. The members of Public Enemy, for example, were one of Farrakhan's early prominent supporters. You can see here 2 songs where they say Farrakhan's a prophet, I think you ought to listen to, or where they said that they were the follower of Farrakhan. But apart from the message of Black empowerment, Farrakhan also spread hate and incitement, especially when it came to Black-Jewish relations. In a speech that Farrakhan held at the John F. Kennedy Center in Washington in 1985, he said, "And we must make a new relationship with America, for the old relationship is dead." You say, Farrakhan, are you trying to break up the old relationship between Jews and Blacks? I most certainly am. I ask you in truth, what kind of relationship do you have? A relationship of a master to a slave. And throughout the years, Farrakhan managed to spread these anti-Semitic notions among famous rappers. One very prominent example is Professor Griff, a member of the political rap group Public Enemy. And in this group, he was the self-proclaimed Minister of Information. In 1988 and 1989, Professor Griff gave several interviews in which he made a series of anti-Semitic remarks. He claimed, for example, that Israel was financed by Nazi Germany and that the very name jewelry is related in its roots to Jews, since it was supposedly run by them. In an interview in 1989, Professor Griff said, with respect to the ongoing First Intifada against Israel, quote, if the Palestinians took up arms and went into Israel and killed all the Jews, it'd be all right, end of quote. A year later, he said in an interview with the Washington Times that Jews were responsible for the, quote, majority of the wickedness that goes on across the globe, end of quote. When Bill Adler, at the time being the director of publicity at Def Jam Records, when Bill Adler confronted Professor Griff about his anti-Semitic statements, Griff named 2 sources that allegedly proved his arguments. One was Henry Ford's anti-Semitic book, The International Jew, and the other one was The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews by the Nation of Islam that Griff received from Farrakhan even before it was published. Throughout the 80s and 90s, Farrakhan served as a spiritual leader for a whole generation of rappers, such as Public Enemy, Ice Cube, or Busta Rhymes. He spoke at 2 hip-hop summits in 1997 and 2001, and he's still approached and praised by numerous famous rappers until today. Another group that I will just briefly mention is the so-called Nation of Gods and Earth, also called 5%ers. The 5%ers are an early offspring of the Nation of Islam and became quite influential among rappers during the 80s and early 90s. The 5%ers regarded rap as a perfect medium to spread their ideology that is based on Black nationalist and Afrocentric ideas. Throughout the 90s, many famous rappers identified themselves as 5%ers, such as Brent Nubian, Busta Rhymes, Poor Righteous Teachers, or the Wu-Tang Clan, among others. Another group that was quite active at that point was the so-called Zulu Nation. The organization was founded by hip-hop icon Afrika Bambaataa in the 1970s. And the initial goal for him was to unify Black and Hispanic hip-hop affiliates. Throughout the 80s, the Zulu Nation tried to create an ideological framework for the hip-hop movement. They developed a code of conduct and demanded from its members to live a Zulu way of life. In doing so, they used specific keywords and ideas by the Nation of Islam and the 5%ers. But compared to these 2 groups, the Zulu Nation was certainly not as dogmatic and not as militant. However, What all these groups had in common was their affinity for conspiracy theories. And just to give you an idea, the Zulu Nation published a list of books, the so-called books for the mind, that they described as, quote, must-reads. The list contains 90 books, and you can actually still find it online. It's mostly conspiracy literature that, for example, conveys Nation of Islam ideology, and it promotes a number of books that spread anti-Semitic ideas, such as The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews by the Nation of Islam, also The Iceman Inheritance by John Henry Clark. And I guess if you do more research on these books, you will find more books that propagate anti-Semitic ideas. When you take a look at that list, I would like to draw your attention to book number 9, which is called Behold the Pale Horse by William Cooper. The book was published in 1991, and the author, William Cooper, was a conspiracy theorist and a radio broadcaster who claimed to have served in a naval intelligence unit. He was killed in an exchange of gunfire in 2001 when security forces in Arizona tried to arrest him on a local criminal charge. His fans, and especially like-minded conspiracists, interpreted his death as a proof for his main thesis, that global forces, specifically an alleged New World Order, are fulfilling their master plan to destroy the world. The cover of the book almost appears as an illustration for a children's book, but the book itself is full of conspiracy theories about an alleged New World Order that is established by global forces, about the CIA that is involved in drug trafficking and collective hypnosis in order to control people's minds, about the government that created HIV to kill people in African countries, and so on. And during the early 90s, Behold the Pale Horse became a very popular book. And at that time, it happened to be one of the most read books in American prisons. And if you take a look at the table of contents, you can see the headline of chapter 15, which says Protocols of the Elders of Zion. And you might think that chapter 15 is a chapter about the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, but it is, in fact, an actual version of the protocols. And Cooper just added one advice. He said, the reader should replace the word Jew with the word Illuminati and the word Goyim with cattle. And by doing so, the text could be regarded as credible source. So I'm telling you all this because Cooper's Behold the Pale Horse also became a very popular book among many rappers throughout the 90s. Famous rapper Old Dirty Bastard, for example, a member of the Wu-Tang Clan, said about Behold the Pale Horse, quote, William Cooper tells you who is effing you. When you're someone like me, that's valuable information, end of quote. Rapper Prodigy, also very famous in the 90s, claimed that he had heard about an Illuminati conspiracy for the first time when he read Behold the Pale Horse. And he also claimed that he had read it 6 times. And Prodigy also serves as an example of how Cooper's conspiracy fantasies were incorporated in rap lyrics from the mid-90s on. In the track I Shot Ya, Prodigy says, the Illuminati wants my mind, soul, and my body. Secret societies trying to keep their eye on me. And throughout the 90s and 2000s, and to a certain extent, even until today, there are numerous rappers who either refer in their lyrics to Cooper's book, or they refer to conspirational fantasies that were promoted by William Cooper, especially the conspiracy theory about an alleged New World Order. And I would like to give you just 2 examples. The first one is by Goody Mob, a rap group from Atlanta. In the track Cell Therapy, they say, quote, the young bloods hanging out at the store 24/7, junkies looking for a hit of the blow, it's powerful. Oh, you know what else they're trying to do? Make a curfew, especially for me and you. The traces of the New World Order, time's getting shorter. If we don't get prepared, people, it's gonna be slaughter, end of quote. So Goody Mob rap about gang activities and drug addicts in their neighborhood, and they perceive this as a part of a conspiracy by the New World Order. These particular lyrics show how the discourse of crisis in rap music is connected with conspiracy theories about a hidden agenda by evil forces who are said to be responsible for the social misery and distress. Another example that I would like to point out is the track Missing by B.O.B. from 2013. It says, it's a new world order that we live in. lies on the lips of every politician. 3 years later, B.O.B. released a track called Flatline, in which he claims that the earth is actually flat. Moreover, the lyrics contain anti-Semitic notions. Quote, "Do your research on David Irving. Stalin was way worse than Hitler. That's why the POTUS got to wear a kippah." So B.O.B. is promoting David Irving, a famous Holocaust denier, and he's also spreading the conspiracy fantasy about an alleged Jewish control of the US government. So when you take a look at conspiracy myths in American rap music, you will rarely see such a clear reference to Jews or to an alleged Jewish conspiracy, which is actually a major difference to German rap music, for example, but this is a different story. However, there are certainly anti-Semitic notions in American rap music, for example, when it comes to the identification of Jews with economic power. Only a few years ago, basketball superstar LeBron James was criticized for showing a song by the rapper 24 Savage on his Instagram. And this particular song, named ASMR, contains the following lyrics. "I don't drink no liquor, but I'm smoking a mimosa. We've been getting the Jewish money. Everything is kosher." And just like LeBron James, 21 Savage apologized for these lyrics and explained that the lyrics were actually meant as a compliment for the Jewish people. On his Twitter, 21 Savage wrote, "The Jewish people I know are very wise with their money. So that's why I said we've been getting Jewish money. I never thought anyone would take offense. I'm sorry, I offended everybody. Never my intention. I love all people." As a matter of fact, he is by far not the only rapper who is using that specific trope. You can actually find it in many rap songs, especially in mainstream rap from recent years. It's not always about the Jewish money that rappers aim for. Sometimes it's also Rothschild money, and you can see some lyrics here. You can read them on your own. And apparently, there is not only a desire for Jewish money or Rothschild money in rap music, but also for a Jewish lawyer. Here's a track by hip-hop icon JayZ in which he says, "Flashback, not having much, not having that, had to get some challah bread so you can holler back and holler at my Jewish lawyer to enjoy the fruit of letting my cash stack." So in this song, JayZ raps about his struggle in life and growing up on the streets and the violence surrounding. And he describes that he made it because now he has a Jewish lawyer working for him. So to him, this is a symbol of economic success. And you will also find that specific trope in numerous other rap songs, apparently also by Jewish rappers such as Drake or Action Bronson. And although these images of Jewish money and Jewish lawyers do not portray Jews as being conspirational or inferior, they still convey stereotypes of Jews as being wealthy or somehow devious, as in the case of the Jewish lawyer. And I would like to give you an example where this identification of Jews with economic power has a more obvious anti-Semitic undertone. It's the song Saint Pablo by Kanye West, and in this song he says, "Black on black lies is worse than black on black crime. The Jews share their truth on how to make a dime. Most black men couldn't balance a checkbook." So Kanye West argues that unlike most black men, the Jews share their truth on how to make a dime, which means that the Jews, in this case, somehow function as ethnic role models for the black community. Nevertheless, they are presented as an advanced collective, as a unified entity that sticks together and that is good with money. And by that, these lyrics feed into anti-Semitic fantasies about an alleged Jewish economic power and social privilege. Last Wednesday, Dave Rich talked about the dispute between British rapper Wiley and his Jewish manager that led Wiley to publish a whole series of anti-Semitic tweets. And Dave Rich also mentioned the case of British radio host Reggie Yates, who said that he thinks it was great that British musicians are no longer managed by, quote, some random fat Jewish guy from Northwest London, end of quote. And actually, this hostile image of the Jewish manager has a history that reaches back to American rap music. In an interview in 2013, American rapper Scarface said, quote, I feel like we are losing hip hop. I feel like the people that are in control of what hip hop does is so effing white and so effing Jewish until they don't give an F about what the culture and the craft and what it really is about. These old ass punks that's running these record labels in the powerful positions to dictate what the Black community hears and listens to, you know what I mean? There's no effing way that you can tell me it's not a conspiracy against the Blacks and hip hop because you put a effing records that makes us look stupid, makes us look dumb. You brainwash a generation of hip hoppers with this effing crud. End of quote. So these are clear anti-Semitic remarks, and Scarface claims that there's a conspiracy going on against hip hop as a whole by Jewish people who allegedly control the music industry. And you can find this hostile image of the Jewish manager also in rap lyrics. A very prominent example is the song No Vaseline by Ice Cube from 1991, in which Ice Cube claimed that their former manager, Jerry Heller, destroyed their rap group NWA. He raps, get rid of that devil, real simple, put a bullet in his temple, because he can't be the N-word for life crew with a white Jew telling you what to do. This line by Wu-Tang Clan rapper RZA was also interpreted as a reference to Jewish managers who, in RZA's opinion, should be kept away from the clan. Same applies to Yazin Bey, formerly known as Mos Def, who released the song The Rape Over, in which he says that some tall Israeli is running this rap shit. The line is interpreted as a reference to Lior Cohen, a prominent American label manager who also has an Israeli citizenship, and this touches the anti-Semitic notion of dual loyalty. In 2010, famous rapper Kendrick Lamar claims in his song The Hearts Part 1 that as a rapper, you will not be successful until, quote, you start paying the Jews, end of quote. And one last example is Lupe Fiasco. He claims in a song from 2016, artists getting robbed for their publishing by dirty Jewish excess who think that it's alms from the covenant. And this song, with this clearly anti-Semitic remark, was originally published on SoundCloud and was then taken off because it violated SoundCloud's hate speech regulations. At the end of my presentation, I would like to briefly point out to the role of anti-Zionism in American rap music, which I believe is, for now, a rather minor phenomenon. I think it was also Dave Rich who said during his presentation that Israel is the battleground of the Muslim-Jewish conflict. And also with respect to what we've heard from Ricky Hollander last week, it is fair to say that Israel will more and more become the metaphorical battleground of Black-Jewish relations. There are rappers that have proclaimed their solidarity with the Palestinian cause and that have made anti-Zionist statements in the past. Here you can see, for example, a tweet by Public Enemy's Chuck D in 2014. He posted a picture of Barack Obama, who sits on the same bus as Rosa Parks did, and Chuck D commented on this picture by saying, quote, I dig you, but free Palestine, my brother. Today, Chuck D publicly supports the BDS movement, and another BDS supporter is the rapper M1 from the famous 90s rap group Dead Prez. In the video, he promoted the BDS movement by saying, I support a free Palestine that is free of Zionism, that is free of general oppression that we endured too as an African community inside the US. Same applies to Talib Kweli and Tef Po. In their song, Which Side Are You On from 2015, they say, quote, don't put a bullet hole in my spleen, new millennium, the Palestinians, and no Zionists in my dreams. Especially Talib Kweli is a strong supporter of the BDS movement. And coming to an end now, but I would like to say that Chuck D and One, as well as Talib Kweli, have a few things in common. All of them consider their music as political rap. All of them belong to an older generation of rappers who were famous in the 90s. And all of them consider their anti-Zionist agenda as a statement against the racism that Black people are suffering from in the US. And I believe that is something that we can observe also in certain parts of the Black Lives Matter movement, and also in some specific anti-racist initiatives in Europe as well. So 30 minutes, that's it for now. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the upcoming discussions. Thank you.